Good evening. My name is Benjamin de Widder. I work for the Forest Landscape Restoration Mechanism, and I hope I will be able to grab the last 15 minutes of your time, because I know it's been a long day for you with a lot of presentations. And I deliver this presentation in the name of our coordinator, Douglas McQuire. First, to set a little bit the stage and give some figures, worldwide, 2 billion hectares of land has been degraded, so it's more than the size of South America. And every year, 24 billion hectares of fertile soils are lost due to erosion. So from 2000 to 2010, around 30 million hectares of forest have been changed into other land use or lost due to natural causes. So this actually, when I finish this sentence, 23 rugby fields have been degraded. So it's quite a huge deal, affecting livelihoods and lives of for these 2 billion hectares, 1.5 billion people live in these areas. So it's quite huge. Under the Global Partnership for Forest and Landscape Restoration, I don't know how many of you know this global partnership. Have you heard of it? The Global Partnership? Yeah. The partners came up with a map to identify key zones for restoration, opportunities for restoration, identifying what kind of restoration options are there. And from the 2 billion hectares that are degraded, 1.5 billion hectares can be restored following a mosaic approach. This means different land uses, different sectors, different stakeholders involved. And the other half billion can be restored to a wide scale, for example, reforestation replantation program. In 2011, the government of Germany, together with IUCN, launched the Bonn Challenge. And this was later endorsed by the New York Declaration on Forests to put into restoration 150 million hectares of degraded and deforested lands by 2020 and 350 million hectares by 2030. So far, 58 commitments were made at the national and local level, decentralized level, for a total of around 170 million. So we're halfway near the target, but as we heard already this morning through other presentations, it's not just the restoration, it's the why we do the restoration and how. Of course, this Bonn Challenge also is a practical means of realizing other international commitments made, such as the land degradation neutrality goal and the SDGs. So I already said, forest landscape restoration is just more than planting trees. It's a landscape approach, so the question why, how, and who, for who, is crucial. It can deliver a lot of biodiversity benefits. For example, you can re-establish corridors between fragmented habitats. You can improve the quality of a habitat. It can also improve the food and water security, and also increase the resilience of livelihoods of local communities, while also, of course, sequestering carbon emissions and also helping with the increasing the adaptive capacity, both of the ecosystem but also from the communities. So, as you might be aware of FLR, it involves a lot of sectors, a lot of different stakeholders. Just want to briefly show you this picture that highlights multiple benefits of forest landscape restoration. So it can help with supply of drinking water, ensure stable soils, reduce erosion, store carbon, increase biodiversity and food security, give good opportunities for recreation and ecotourism. And there's also, depending on the why and the how, the different options of forest landscape restoration. You can do tree plantation, you can do assisted natural regeneration, you can do improve the management of existing forest and plantation. You can improve the management of plantations techniques. You can also increase trees with agriculture, with crops. So there's a variety of options available. So in 2014, the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism was established to support countries to meet their pledges made under the Bonn Challenge to restore the degraded lands. As part of the Global Partnership of Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism, we support, first of all, through normative work at the different levels. For example, team up with the different teams within the FAO, but also with other institutions to come up with policy advice, to come with support with monitoring and evaluation issues, also to, for example, help countries to mobilize financial and technical resources. So there's a variety of sectors involved in forest landscape restoration. So our mechanism is really interacting with different specialists and experts within the house or outside FAO. But to really realize all these pledges made by the countries, we need a lot of funds, a lot of finances, and a lot of expertise. But in 2017, FAO, together with the Global Mechanism on the UNCCD, came up with a discussion paper highlighting what kind of innovative financing mechanisms can be used for forest landscape restoration at a local and a national level. It also gives a kind of it also gave an idea of the barriers of financing for FLR. We also got a community of practice focusing on especially this sustainable financing mechanisms for forest landscape restoration. At the country level, the forest landscape restoration mechanism is mainly working through four kind of work packages. One is looking at the enabling environment at the policy level. The other one is looking at really establishing pilot and large-scale restoration programs on the ground. Third package is looking at really trying to leveraging this different financing mechanism, public, private, domestic, international, and build the capacity to look at this increased blended finance for forest landscape restoration opportunities. And the fourth is looking at knowledge dissemination and management and monitoring and evaluation, which is key when we talk about forest landscape restoration interventions. Just to give you an example, recently it was the largest to date GEF multi-agency project was launched, the Restoration Initiative. It combines three GEF agencies, IUCN, FAO and UN Environment, covering 10 African and Asian countries to help to restore the degraded lands. FAO is leading in 5 countries, Central African Republic, DRC, Sao Tome and Principe, and Kenya and Pakistan. But each of these countries have got like a main focus for their GEF project. For example, in Kenya, we're looking more at the business aspect with the small and medium enterprises in collaboration with the Forest and Farm Facility to look at really develop the business case for restoration and work together with the business incubation mechanisms. In Central African Republic, for example, we will work with private sector forest companies to also have this combined forest and landscape restoration interventions. So it all depends. In Pakistan, we work on the value chain of pine nuts as a main entry point. And I'm glad you mentioned earlier the bamboo. In Cameroon, they're focusing quite a bit on bamboo as an important tool and method for restoration interventions. And just recently, we also received support from the German Climate Initiative to build the capacity at regional national level to ensure FLR options. They're already in the national determined contributions from a lot of countries. I think recently IUCN did a study that around 70% include them, but the issue is of the quantification in terms of emissions and in terms of cost and benefits. So we also recently launched with the different partners under the global partnership from FLR a study on this cost and benefit analysis. We analyzed that. The analysis showed that there's not much homogeneous information available. So now we're trying to come up with this harmonized approach to collect the similar data through projects and programs, and so other countries and people that want to really restore can learn from other projects and exactly know what kind of investments are needed for what kind of services. Just to end with a kind of an example for India. India was one of the first countries in 2015 to commit and to pledge under this bond challenge. They pledged to restore 21 million hectares, 13 million hectares by 2020 and 8 million hectares by 2030, which is in line with the national forestry policy to increase the forest cover to one third of the land. Also in India, we have a current, the largest FAO GEF-funded project, Green Ag. It's transforming the Indian agriculture for global conservation benefits. Because you know, GEF often is linked with biodiversity, land degradation, and climate change. Under GEF 7, India also proposed to have projects submitted to the GEF 7 under the 2 different impact programs, the dry land and the food system land use restoration. And as also earlier said, the Green Climate Fund provides an excellent opportunity for really large-scale restoration programs. We at FLRM, we already are currently discussing for different countries kind of this blended financing approach with banks and us as technical partner to submit proposals for the Green Climate Fund for large-scale restoration efforts. So thank you. I hope I've been not too fast, but in due for time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It's always a challenging issue to be the last in the day. But anyway, any question from your side? Okay. Then from my side, first issue, of course, it's very important that FLR integrates, like also 10 years ago, Red Plus, into the overall activities that exist in the landscape, forest activities, agriculture, and so on, land use planning. It cannot be something that overrides what exists, but it has to be strengthen what exists. I think this is an important issue, and land use planning is a very crucial issue. I recall very clearly the case of Indonesia, the country that loses more forests in your region, not in percentage but in absolute term. And basically it were commercial plantations, especially of palm oil, where the Indonesians sends millions of hectares of degraded imperata grassland waiting. So an issue not to prohibit or limit, but to shift this kind of demands to degraded land where the palm tree can grow and leave the natural forest at least sustainable managed or protected, but not degraded for it. So land use planning is very important, and also searching, analyzing which has been in the past the deforestation causes. There are countries, for example, Congo, Brazzaville came here, wanted to plant 1 million hectares. We analyze it, and these were permanently burned every year, this area. So if we don't have a consistent firefighting program, you will have tomorrow the presentation by David Moore, has no sense. There are, in Africa especially, 10-year issue with sometimes 2 or 3 10-year situations, conflicting 10-year arrangement overlapping. You have to have a consistent seed supply. We discussed this in Spain the first week. So there are many elements you need. You can bring, many countries have very skilled master and PhD specialists domestic, and you can bring some from outside. But if countries have been successful in forests, it's because they had a strong vocational foresters on the ground. And this is the reason of Indian success, of China's success, of the Maghreb countries, of Turkey. And the non-success of rich countries like Lebanon, for example. They want to plant, and they came with cost of $7,000 per hectare. They wanted to plant 2 meter big trees and irrigate, confusing the forest with a park. I mean, these kind of things happen because they don't have vocational training foresters. And this you cannot improvise. They are very important for collecting the seeds, for watching after the forest, for controlling that there is no encroachment, for the nurseries. And these kind of issues are crucial, and they need a time. So at the end, it's a chain. The weakest point of the chain will fail. The other element, despite the figures made feel impressive, and unfortunately the international commitments were not very clear, if it is just above business or the overall ambition. Because in the previous decade, gain of forest by planting, successful planting plus natural expansion added nearly 8 million hectares a year. So in these 20 years of the 2 commitments, this is 160 million hectares. So if the 170 pledges are additional, we are more or less there. And the other element which I want you to retain for tomorrow is the issue of assisted natural regeneration that has been an Asian project. This is where, especially in relatively humid mountain environment, agriculture withdraws by decline of population and pressure, there is this method which is better than intensive planting or abandonment. It's an intermediate system that may be more biodiverse and maybe much cheaper and may allow to act in much more areas. So just keep that also in mind, that there are these kind of nature-based solutions that also may allow to cope with each other. And it basically has been a strong Asian contribution in your region. So just to keep in mind, of course, if you can do intensive plantation, like you commented with bamboo, and provide more livelihoods, that's also an interesting opportunity. So I think this is a very important area. I am sorry that we had little time, but please follow it closely. And this is also an area that is not contentious. In Rio plus 20, there were the Rio dialogues. The second most voted issue was forest landscape restoration. It can be packed to big projects of hundreds of millions of dollars. We can strengthen commitment of international financial institutions, and it is not being contentious makes much more easier that they make co-funding. So I think there's an avenue of opportunity. Please.
If you allow me, I forgot one thing to mention, very important. Just recently, the United Nations General Assembly also declared the decade for ecosystem restoration from 2021 to 2030, and FAO UN Environment will co-lead the implementation. So it's a very good opportunity to really start large-scale implementations.
Okay, so thank you a lot. And with this, we close the afternoon session.